This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this episode, what I want to do is I want to go back, right? I've been doing this podcast for a while, and as we roll over into a new year, at the time of this recording is 2024, one thing that I kind of realized, particularly after I hit my 500th episode last year, is that like I needed to do somewhat of a reset. And what I mean by that is kind of explaining to people, because you pick up new listeners and new followers all the time, right? Kind of explaining to people who may not have been here from day one to kind of explain how I got here. It didn't happen by osmosis. I didn't fall out of the sky. I didn't come down on an asteroid. But, kind of giving you a little synopsis of me, 12 Kyle, and who I am. And again, it wasn't anything spectacular. As dope as I think I am, whatever level of success or perseverance that I think that I had, it came over a period of time. So I wanted to to quote Jay-Z, allow me to reintroduce myself to you, the listening audience. So how I got here. At the time of this recording, I am 51 years old. I don't feel like I'm 51. I don't think I look like I'm 51. The grades might say a little different, but as you can see on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. But yeah, I don't feel like I'm 51. But no, it started way back in the day in 1972. I was born to my mother and father. I'm the oldest. There's me and my brother Damon. And then my father remarried and had my sister Kara. And so I think, well, let me just start from day one. I think the word that I got was the day that I was born, it snowed. And it was like 10 inches of snow. I was born in Newark, New Jersey. I'm from South Carolina, but I was born in New Jersey. And people always bug out, man, I didn't know you were from New Jersey. No, I'm not from New Jersey. I was born in New Jersey. We lived in New Jersey for almost 3 years, and then we moved to Florence, South Carolina, which is my hometown. And that was key because my parents didn't want me to grow up in Newark. And no shade to Newark, but I'm glad I didn't grow up in Newark either. My dad is from New Jersey, from Newark, and my mom is from Florence, South Carolina. And so they got married in 71, had me in 72, and they had already determined that Newark wasn't going to be a place where I grew up, because you grow up fast. And they wanted me to grow up slow like anybody else and have a regular childhood. And I did. And so, yeah, I'm almost 3 years older than I was 3 school years older than my brother, Damon. And so, being the oldest, that comes with a level of responsibility, and it's not one that I take lightly. I enjoy actually being the big brother. Although now, me and Damon have always been close, so it's not like, I'm the big brother, but I'm still, we talk all the time, and there's not one decision that I'm going to make without checking with him first, because I respect him and love him, and definitely appreciate his views on everything. And like I said, we grew up in Florence. Florence is a small place, relatively speaking. Florence, probably growing up, was probably about, 50,000 people, if that. It didn't seem that big. It didn't seem that small, because you were really kind of confined to whatever area that you lived in. You didn't really, we ventured out. I had a great childhood. I did the stuff that everybody in my neighborhood did. We played outside, and you guys hear me talk a lot ad nauseum about being outside, because outside was the dopest thing, because everything happened outside. Like, there was, we had video games came around, and I remember I got a Atari 2600 like when I was 12, and I think when I was like 11 we got cable TV, and I used to spend hours watching MTV, because that was something new, that was something different. I'd never seen music videos, and then eventually BET would come along, and I would become a huge fan of Rap City and so forth and so on. But no, it was my childhood was really, really dope. And it's funny because, like, I don't downplay it, because I really, really enjoyed it. And I also kind of feel sometimes for people who have had rough childhoods. There was nothing rough about my childhood at all. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were made to feel as if we did. Because I'll be honest, like, my parents, I don't think, if I had to guess, and I don't know the true number, I don't think my parents ever made like more than $30,000 a year. And that's a guess. So, by the time I had, graduated from college and got my first job or so, well, maybe my second job, but I was making more than them, or what they had made. And so, but even in saying that, as far as my parents are concerned, they are easily, hands down, the biggest influences that I have in my life, and they're still with me here, on this planet. And I really enjoy the fact that I can still talk to them and be in their ear. And again, my mom and my dad are two people that I still rely on for, not so much as advice, but just talking to them, and we talk daily. But like I said, my childhood was really, really dope in Florence. Did a lot of things, played a lot of sports, and the one sport that I fell in love with was football. By the time I was 8 years old, I was playing organized football. So the cover art that you see, which really was the inspiration for this post, I want to say I was like 9. As you can see, I wasn't wearing number 12. I didn't wear number 12 until I think I was like 11. But my first number that I wore was 84. And I love playing football. And you know what it was? I think more than anything else, it was really about the spirit of competition, just being able to compete. And so, like, I would play football with my friends and some of the older guys in the neighborhood, and I found out I was good at it. And I really, really, really love to compete with other people. And I think over a period of time, that drive, as far as the level of pushing yourself to compete and then competing against others, I think really pushed me to be, who I eventually would become. But yeah, like I said, we didn't have a lot of money. We lived in, quote unquote, the projects. Now let me just differ. There's a different type of project in Florence, South Carolina, as opposed to, Cabrini Green or Queensbridge or the Nickerson Gardens. Yeah, our projects, Mount Zion apartments, ain't the same. But it was low income housing, and we lived there until I think like 83, 84, when my parents bought a house. And what was interesting was, they bought a house, and So we moved out of this apartment, and all of a sudden now me and Damon, we have our own rooms, and we're chilling, and everything was good until it wasn't. Not long after that, my parents said, "Hey, yo, we're getting a divorce." Huh? What you mean we getting a divorce? And like that was the biggest shock because again, for me and for Damon, we had never heard them even argue, which is not something I can say my kids can say, but no, we never even heard them argue. So for it to go from, chilling in the house and we had a dog and, we were living the quote unquote American dream, by having home ownership. And what was dope was my school, McLaurin, was literally and figuratively at the end of my street. So it took me a minute to walk to school and a minute to get home. And all of a sudden, my parents say, "Hey, we're getting a divorce." It was a crushing blow. And so, I was headed into the 7th grade when this happened. And so I'm in middle school. And so this is when things kind of turned for me because I think like at this point, I'm playing football, I'm playing organized football, I'm playing baseball too. And I was always really, really good student in school. I got good grades. I can't say I was a nerd, but I was, I was pretty smart. Pretty sharp, always pretty sharp. Love the subjects of like language arts, English, social studies. Hated math, hated science. Well, no, I can't. Well, let me go back. In elementary school, I really liked math and science. By the time I got to middle school, math and science was god awful. I mean, hey, it is what it is. You can boo if you want. But yeah, it was just terrible. It was just terrible. So I was like, no, I'm not rocking with this. But it got to a point where I had to kind of figure some things out because now the two most important people in my life are going their separate ways. And so not only this, but I have to be, there for my younger brother. And so like, there's no blueprint for that. And I think as tough as divorces are, it's so hard on the kids. And so me and Damon really had to navigate through our parents' divorce. And not only that, but by the time I get to 7th grade, I'm going to 7th grade, he's going to 4th grade. Not only are our parents getting a divorce, but we're moving away from the house. Now, fortunately, my mom never sold the house. She rented it out. But we were moving across town to my aunt's house. And, that was going to be something in and of itself because now I'm going to a new school. I'm going to a middle school. And, I knew some people from my school that was going to middle school. Middle school's called Williams. And I knew a couple of people, from the neighborhood or whatever like that, but I didn't really know a lot of people. And I just remember one of my most fondest memories was the first day of middle school. I got off that bus and man, I looked around and I ain't see no familiar face. And of course, my cousin Eric was there. You guys have heard me talk about my cousin Eric. That's like, we're cousins, but we're really brothers. My mothers are sisters, and we literally grew up together. And I'm 9 months older than Eric, but we've always been neck and neck, always together. And so he was in the house, so that was cool. But I didn't even see Eric that day because we rode on the bus, and it seemed like we got off the bus and he went one way and I went the other way. But like I remember that memory of, and then I just remember somebody walking up to me and say, "Hey, what's up?" And the kid who said "what's up," I didn't know him, but like he was this nerd. Like nerd. And I just remember just talking to him, and then like some other nerds came over, and I was really this, kind of quiet, unassuming kid hanging with these nerds, and these nerds were loving the fact that I was talking to them, and I was like, I don't know nobody. But that would change. I would eventually run into a couple of cats, and we would become crew, and these would be, my best friends in the world, and still are to this day. And my boy Jay Fresh, who I talk about all the time, Jay Fresh, we went to the same church together, but I would only see him on Sundays. And then he came to that. He was at school too. And so it just, socially it kind of took off, but you're still dealing with the after effects of a divorce. But in the meantime, I was balling on the football field, doing well in class. And then, seventh grade math, man, that was something different. That was something totally different. I didn't understand that shit. Like, it was crazy. But anyway, I just, matriculated on to high school. And once I got to high school, Wilson High School, things were a little bit different. I knew more people, and I think who I was started to come out. And I was never shy or bashful about who I was, but I think what I did was I remained very guarded. Like, my crew got to know me, but outside of my crew, I think I tried my best to control the narrative as to who I wanted you to think I was. And wasn't no tough guy. I wasn't walking around Wilson slapping people, but I wasn't no punk either. So, I was like right in the middle. And I was cool with people. But my high school years were really, really dope. Every year got progressively better. And then in the classroom and then on the football field, things just really took off. And, by the time I'm a sophomore in high school at Wilson, I was like, I'm going to college. And I started looking at these colleges and stuff like that. And I was just like, I had made up my mind at that point that, I was going to an HBCU. And because everybody in my family had gone to South Carolina State, which is a historically black college in Orangeburg, South Carolina, that is located 90 miles from where I live in Florence, I didn't want to go to South Carolina State. I had to make a decision. I had a list. South Carolina State was probably 4th or 5th on the list. Like, there was no desire whatsoever to go to South Carolina State. And as fate would have it, I ended up going to South Carolina State. Long story short, I was doing my thing on the football field, and, a couple of schools came looking. It wasn't heavily recruited because I was 5'7", a $145 soaking wet, but I was balling on the field all region or whatever, all county, whatever you want to call it. And so I was successful, and I had really, really good grades, but I wasn't interested in going to Clemson. I wasn't interested in going to the University of South Carolina. I wasn't interested in going into the University of Georgia or any other place. I didn't want to go to any PWIs. It was going to be an HBCU. So I applied at Howard. I applied at North Carolina A&T. I applied at South Carolina State and some other place. And, Hampton. So I got into Hampton and South Carolina State on the same day. I got my acceptance letters on the same day. And I was all but locked in to go to Hampton. One of my best friends, my boy Zell, you guys have heard him on here as well. Zell had already decided to go to Hampton, so I was probably going to Hampton. And then I found out Hampton was looking at going on probation in football. I was like, nah, I can't do that. I was like, I'm not trying to get caught up in anybody's probation. But in the meantime, South Carolina State was still there, and they started recruiting not only me, but my quarterback, Keyshawn, and my tight end, Ronald Barr. And it was, the decision for them to recruit Keyshawn Durant, who was one of the best athletes I've ever seen in my life. Once they started recruiting him, I was like, and then the recruiter, our offense coordinator, he pitched it to me. He said, hey, you can come to South Carolina State, and you and Keyshawn and Ronald can recreate what you guys are doing here at Wilson. And we tore it up at Wilson. And so I was like, that sounded good. And it wasn't far from home. I was very familiar with the campus, everything. And then I knew Eric was going, and Eric's older brother, Mike, was already there. And so I was like, all right. And so the three of us, were committed to go to South Carolina State. And so I go to South Carolina State, and, even at Wilson, everything lined up pretty good. I had, I had relationships, never got too serious. but I had relationships, and those relationships I think helped, kind of form who I would become down the road. Still very much guarded, even in my relationships. Not letting young ladies get too close. Wasn't going to say the L word unless I meant it, because my dad said, "Hey man, don't ever tell a girl that you love her unless you mean it." He was like, that many people get hurt or die from that word, and that stuck with me. But socially I was doing fine, and I go to South Carolina State, and it was one of the best decisions I'd ever made in my life. Everything flipped upside down. Everything changed. Everything. I can't say everything was perfect, because I had my bumps in the road, and I've talked about them on other podcasts, and I'll talk about them more as other podcasts in the future come up. But it was a rough road, and I think one of the things that inspired this particular episode was there's a line in this song by Jay-Z and Eminem. The song is called Renegade, and in the song Eminem says, "I don't think you have a clue what it took for me to get here." And that line always stuck with me, because I honestly felt like that. Like, people would meet me, people would see me, and they get to know me, befriend me, whatever. And they might know what they see in the classroom. They might know what they see on the football field. But you have no idea what it took for me to get there, because along the way there were doubters. And I mean, like, I'll be honest, there was people in my family was like, "You going to college? You going to play football in college? I don't think that's going to happen." And so I use that as fuel for my motivation to do what I had to do. And I don't think it was anything malicious by it. I just think everybody can't see your vision. And, I'll be honest, even in high school, I wasn't that focused. I was focused on football. I was focused on my schoolwork, but I mean, I was going to do what I had to do. But I wasn't like trying to kill it in the classroom. I wasn't trying to be valedictorian, but I mean, I was an A-B student. And, I was very satisfied with my grades. Could I have tried harder in some subjects? Yeah, of course. But, I enjoyed what I enjoyed. But like I said, by the time I got to South Carolina State, it was really about that line. I don't think you have a clue what it took for me to get here, or what I did to get here. And that became like my motivation. Not that the song was out, but I mean, I'm just giving you an example of my mindset was, most people who met me had no idea what it took, or where I came from, or the mindset that it took to, get to where I was. And it's not like, again, I'm not from a big place. I'm not from, I wasn't ducking bullets on my way to school or anything like that. There weren't any gangs in Florence. It wasn't none of that stuff to distract most people and some of the people that I would eventually go to school with. But if you come up in a place and you don't really see a lot of people who have it in their mindset to get to a certain point and then keep pushing past that point, then you can fall victim to some of that mindset too. And I tell people all the time, like, for as much as I love my hometown, as much as I love my high school, as much as I love the people in that city, I knew the day that my mama dropped me off at college, I was never going back to Florence to live, ever. That was never going to be an option. It didn't matter if I stayed in Orangeburg. It didn't matter if I stayed in Booyakaville. I was never going back home because I think I'd outgrown it, and I just really gotten to the point where, like, once I left, I left. I mean, like, I would come back on, spring break and stuff like that, and for the summer, but coming back to live, it wasn't going to happen, and I was okay with that. And what I did was I found out a lot about myself, particularly in some tough times, when I was struggling in classes, and even some of the classes that I struggled in. Some of the struggles were, shall I say, self-inflicted. I mean, who gets an F in art appreciation. As I raise my hand. I mean, in art appreciation, I really got an F. I mean, is that possible? I don't know. I know when my mom saw the grade, she wasn't happy at all. She was quite livid and was asking, like, how did you fail art appreciation? Also failed another class. Only two classes I failed at South Carolina State. I failed art and I failed psychology. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I failed psychology. Well, I know what to tell you. I didn't go to class. So if you don't go to class, then yeah, stuff like that will happen. And same for art. I didn't go to class. But even in all of that, like being a marketing major in the School of Business, which there'll be an upcoming episode about the School of Business. Shout out to Belcher Hall. I think I learned a lot about myself because there's rarely self-doubt, especially at that particular time. Rarely self-doubt, but you cannot have you cannot be burdened with self-doubt, but still have the mindset of how am I going to get this done? I mean, I go to South Carolina State, I'm playing football, but I'm not on football scholarship. Am I going to work to earn a scholarship? Am I going to take out loans? Am I going to graduate? I mean, all of this stuff is on me. And I know that there's no way I can mess this up because I can't go back home and I can't be like, hey, Mom, can you give me $5,000? You know, it's just not going to happen. So I had to figure some things out. I had to figure a lot of stuff out. And both of my parents had and by the time I went to college, had some college, but they had gone as far as I'd gone. And so, you know, they're not really sources of information, if you will. So I had to figure it out. And I think I did a pretty good job. So I go through school, play football. We won a championship, the Black College National Championship in 1994. Also in 1994, I meet this young lady who I wasn't even sure that I even liked. I didn't even look at her like that because she was younger than me. And I've told the story several times, and I'm not going to get into the details, but I would eventually meet this young lady who would later become my wife, Sharice. And so, you know, that was something in and of itself, because I don't think, you know, like, you don't go to college. At least I didn't. I wasn't going to college looking for. I was going to college to have a good time, play football, because football is my first love. I mentioned that on this episode before. Football has always been my first love. So long before it was hip hop, long before it was girls, long before it was anything else, it was football. And football has always been there. And it's the one thing that I don't think ever put me in any kind of pain. Now, of course, yeah, you're going to get banged up from playing football, but you can get your heart broken with girls. Football never broke your heart. Never. Football is always that one steady thing there, you know, so, but along the way, just, you know, I found out a lot about myself. And I became, you know, so much ingrained in music as well. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know that I'm a huge fan of music, huge fan of hip hop. I grew up in a house where music was played constantly. We had records, and my mom had records, and my dad had records, and then eventually they bought me records, and Damon got records, and we had our own little record collections, and music was constantly flowing in my house, and that's the one thing I think the technology kind of robbed me from here, is that with the advent of the internet, not a lot of music gets played in my house. I mean, it gets played, but it gets played in headphones and on iPhones. But yeah, all of these things kind of help mold me into who I would become. So I graduate, and I have to make a huge decision at this point because I'm graduating 1996, December 96, and my girlfriend, who I was living with, Sharice, at the time, we're living together, but like I gotta at this point, I've spent 5.5 years at South Carolina State. It took me 5.5 years to graduate. And those were the longest 5.5, but those were the best 5.5 years of my life. If I could jump in a time machine tomorrow, I'd do it all over again. I might work a little harder in some classes. Shout out to accounting, shout out to financial management. But yeah, so it's like I had to figure out like, okay, well, what's next? And then, I came up with the idea of moving to Atlanta in the summer of 97 and talked to Jay Fresh, and Jay Fresh said he wanted to do it too. And so we decided to move to Atlanta together, which as I mentioned on a previous podcast, I just knew he was going to back out at the last minute. I didn't think for a second Jay Fresh was going to accompany me to Atlanta. And we came, and I've been here since 1997. And honestly, I don't know. I know for a fact I didn't plan to be here this long. It's not like I wanted to leave and go somewhere else, but I didn't plan on being here this long. But time happens, and you put your feet down and you plant your flag pretty much. In 1999, something would happen that would change my life forever. And that was becoming a father. Sharice gave birth. I didn't give birth. I was there though. Sharice gave birth to our first son, Dion. And that day, August 9th, 1999, changed everything for me. It changed the way I looked at life, changed the way I carried myself. It changed everything because now I had someone who was totally, unequivocally, unapologetically dependent upon me, and I had to get it right. And I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be the best father in the world. And, that's still a goal. And even having surpassed my parents financially, I say this all the time, and I really and truly mean it. I don't think, like, my goal is to be a better parent than they were. And for me, I think that's damn near impossible because they are the best. Like, you think your mom is dope? My mom is the greatest. My dad is the greatest. And I just, when the time, whenever that time comes for me to check up out of here, I hope that my kids say the same. And so we had Dion in 99. We got married in 2000. 2001, we bought this house. And, 2002, we would have Cameron. And then 2006, we had Brandon. And then in 2011, we had our daughter Skylar. So we had 3 boys and a girl. And nowhere in the mix did I ever think, like, I knew that even back in South Carolina State, I knew that I would get married one day. I knew that I'd have a child. I knew I'd have a son. What was interesting, I remember when she went to get the ultrasound, when she was pregnant with Dion, she called me because she was still in Orangeburg. I was in Atlanta. And she said, it's a boy. And I was like, yeah, you damn right it's a boy. Because he had to be a boy. But yeah, it was, over that time period, I get into the workforce, I'm working, and trying to do what I can to make a living, not just for myself, but a comfortable living for my wife and my kids. And even that, there were days man, I ain't know how we was going to make it. I'll be honest. And they were just because maybe the job wasn't what I wanted it to be, or the money wasn't what I wanted it to be, or I wanted more money and I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. And that's all fine and good, but you can't just abandon, your responsibilities, because everything I did it for them, and it's an interesting concept because if you're a father, well, actually before you're a father, you're taught just to do, and everything that you're doing is for you. But then when you become a parent, when you become a husband, all of that stuff kind of goes out the window. the priorities shift. So, and I'm not saying that I haven't done things for me. I've done plenty of stuff for me, but everything that I do, everything that I've done, has been for my family. And I tell my kids all the time, like, I was like, when we bought this house, it was a big house and it was just three of us. So, I remember the first time my mom came in and she walked in the front door and she started looking around and she was like, it's a whole lot of house for three people. Little did I know that we were going to fill up the house. But, I don't think you kind of think of those things. You're just kind of taking the next step. And to be honest, one of the many beauties about this podcast is that it's allowed me to, in my stories, in my experiences, look back. Because I think sometimes in the race that you run, we were always taught to, how horses race when they have the blinders on. They have blinders on because so that they can run their race, and horses have their eyes on the side of their heads. Unfortunately, we're humans, we don't have that, but they run the race with the blinders on because you don't want them to get distracted by what they see on the side. And I think for a long time, I ran the race like that. Not necessarily worrying about what was on the side of me, just what was in front of me. And that's cool. But it also, when that happens, sometimes you don't get the chance to ever step back and reflect as to what you did right, what you did wrong, or anything like that. And I think one thing that this podcast has allowed me to do is, not just share those experiences to who I am, but, kind of give me a chance to reminisce and be like, you know what, you did okay. Because like, no matter what, I mean, society has this picture of, what they think you are or what you should be. And I don't think I fall in any of that stuff because I don't live by society standards. I think there was a point in time where, especially living here in Atlanta, you want to keep up with the Joneses. You want to get a new car. You want to get a new house. You want to get this. You want to get that. You want to have the flyest clothes. And all that stuff is cool. But can't live like that. Like, you just can't. And if you live like that, you got to keep that shit up. I ain't trying to keep up with the Joneses. I just never have been. But I think this podcast has given me the opportunity to do that. And it's also given me the opportunity to share. Now, I will say this. I have some podcast friends that, they tell people from time to time that I'm a millionaire. I'm not even close to being a millionaire. I don't have no money. So I ain't got it here. But it's all in good fun. In conclusion, I think one of the things that I've learned as I've traveled this journey is to, one, look back and appreciate what I've done, and then also share my story, because I think that's what this podcast actually helps me do. There's somebody listening to this podcast that's going to take some level of inspiration or say, hey, well, he did it. I mean, like, whatever you think I did, whatever it is, I mean, I did it my way. It wasn't all me. I was definitely surrounded by people. I'm someone who, although I don't talk religion, I have a very, very strong belief in God. So I know that, no, I ain't do none of this by myself. I don't think even something as simple as meeting someone who I would spend the rest of my life with, I don't think, because I didn't step to her like, yo, let's kick it or whatever. It was just somebody that I just met, on the humble, and somebody who I was actually resisting that meeting because I didn't want any parts of not meeting her, but just the situation. And I explained the situation before, which is still comical to this day. But I think even in doing that, it's allowed me to, like I said, reflect. And I remember just like a couple of days ago, we were sitting down at the table, whole family, and I was just listening to the kids talk. And I remember when Sharice and I were living together in college, and we would just talk, and we would sometimes lay in the bed, sometimes we'd be in the car, and we would just be talking about what our future would look like. And those conversations were really, really, really dope, but they looked nothing like how things turned out. And I think that's a testament to us. I think that's a testament to, our faith. And I think that's a testament to, perseverance, because it's not going to always be easy. And, one thing that my parents instilled in me is that, no matter what you do, it's not going to be easy. If it was going to be easy, everybody would do it. And so life is never easy. But like I said, this podcast is giving me a chance to introduce who I am to you. There's 12 Kyle and there's Kyle. I'd like to think that 12 Kyle and Kyle are the same person. But honestly, you guys have to decide that. There's some who listen to this podcast that know me a little bit better than most. And then there's some people that listen that don't know me at all, but have gotten to know me through this medium. And I'm thankful for that. This podcast hasn't blown up or anything like that. And if it does, cool. If it doesn't, that's cool too. I make a few dollars at my job, so I'm okay. I'm okay. I got a call. I got $32 in my pocket right now. I'm good. But I think more than anything, as to going back to something that I mentioned a little earlier, there was a point in my life where I was very guarded, and I made sure that I controlled who I let get to know me. And I think through this podcast medium and through this particular episode, you got to know a little bit more about me. What you take from that, I don't know. But I hope that you take my words and my experiences and find something in them to help you along your journey. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Remember, this podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes on Sundays at midnight. Make sure that you follow me. And not only just follow, but also subscribe. The podcast is on all platforms. We have a YouTube channel as well. You can subscribe there. If you feel so inclined, I told you I had $32. Send me $1. Hit me up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. Also on TikTok. Follow me on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram at 12 Kyle Podcast, at 12 Kyle spelled out. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.
When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If you work in university maintenance, Grainger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Grainger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more, and all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, visit Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.